Lead the charge.
We're back. This one's going to be a good one as well too. It's back to the bro session. We haven't had one of these in a while, and now it feels like summer's almost over. Even though technically speaking, summer ends on September 21st. Summer ends. If the weather's kind of already started shifting against us right across the board, and it's been kind of a crazy summer, but so much has happened, and we have a lot to catch up on. But I think probably the best place to start is how was your summer?
It's good. It's good. I think last time we chatted, I just got back from Europe, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
that was good. I think it was a different summer than what I expected, or not than what I expected. Sorry, but then kind of what I've had before, which is nice. Enjoyed a lot of it. Europe was good, and then kind of back into it. We got to go to Vancouver for the Surge. We'll chat about that a little bit.
Yeah,
there was an event. I feel like every weekend, which is kind of classic Calgary. I think you get 3 months of summer, and you got to do something every weekend. Weddings.
Yeah.
Lots of weddings. One last wedding this weekend, and then, yeah, it's good overall though. What about you?
Yeah, it's been a crazy summer. I don't even know where to start. I think diving deeper into your point there in regards to, it's different. We haven't really had a summer in years, right? It was always either installing on roofs, running around chaotically trying to be able to do business development, or ultimately really kind of just feeling anxious that there wasn't enough time in the day, so we had to capitalize on the summer. Like I remember when it was Stampede, we used to get so excited because we knew people couldn't really book meetings and we would catch up. And Stampede was time that we used to be able to catch up. But going back to the bigger picture here, yeah, summer was good. I went on a trip though. So I know you had your trip to Europe, and part of it was solo to an extent, but you were around either friends or family the entire time.
Yep.
And I kind of had an opportunity to have a little bit more of a Kai trip than a Gursh trip, which I kind of took off by myself. So yeah, that was actually really interesting. I learned a lot and had a lot of really hilarious moments and some fun moments as well too. So yeah, it wasn't bad.
Anyways, I guess we start with that. Start with the trip. Tell me about the trip.
Well, I guess you know the details in this, but it's interesting. So the realities of owning a business is never predictable, right? Like you can't just write a book and say, hey, when you start a business, this is what it's going to be like. Mm-hmm. It's always very unique to the individual. Everybody's going to experience it differently than anyone else. And I think that's what ended up happening to me is you would come back from your trip and we had the podcast, we talked about it. And then I was asking you a lot of questions. I'm like, how was this? How is this? Like, how's your mind? What are all these different things that you went through, and what were your takeaways? And I kind of sat on them for a couple of days, and then I came back and I pretty much was like, okay, hey, listen, I'm going on a trip and I'm going by myself. And the trip was interesting from that perspective because obviously, like I have a family and like want to be able to spend time with them, but I felt like I needed to do this in order to be able to serve everybody in my life, whether it be my colleagues at work, my family, my friends, whatever it was. I needed to go take time alone and be in a space where I didn't have my normal, interactions and see what would happen. So what I did is I got into my car, I packed a tent, packed a chair, packed enough underwear to be able to get through a couple of days, and then pretty much just drove aimlessly. Like didn't book any hotels, didn't have any really fixed locations other than like general ones. And I ended up leaving Calgary, went to Kelowna, went down to Abbotsford, shot down to Seattle, and then Tacoma, Portland, and back up to Vancouver, and then back to Calgary. And there was supposed to be the only element that I really planned in there was the Calgary Surge playoff tournament, or the championship weekend, and then my dad flying in to see me, but he ended up getting sick and he didn't get to see me, so that piece I missed out on. So him and I have a vacation, I guess, or a little bit of a trip that we have to make up. But it was a really interesting trip. I was able to find out a lot about myself in regards to who I think I am versus who I want it to be. And then ultimately, like, how is it that I perceive the world? Am I looking at it through the right lens? And then ultimately the answer was no. Like, I definitely left that trip and came back, not necessarily a different person. I am just who I am. But I came back with a sharpened focus and a better understanding of what the world actually needs me to be, which is, you know, as authentic of an individual as I can be at all times, because that's ultimately what leads to the greatest level of success when, in my opinion, as per what I define it as.
Interesting. So is that like, that's the takeaway? Like what's the biggest, so that's the kind of the ethos and the takeaway of the
Oh
trip?
man. Okay, so I had 4 big takeaways. Or I guess I had 4 revelations and 1 epiphany. And it generally, I won't get too deep into this, but I believe that everybody will experience a revelation and confuse it as an epiphany. But an epiphany for me is like something that's super, super deep. And the epiphany that I came away with, and this one, I don't think I've even really proper to share this with you yet. So I might as well just tell the world, right? Is that every single major decision that I've made in my life, I've made out of a position of fear. So, and which is interesting because I think people as a whole don't generally lean into fear. They don't acknowledge it for what it is, but it turns out that I kind of faced a lot of things that I didn't think I was going to face. And I'll give you an example. So, moving to Calgary, Janet was the one that decided to do that, and then I followed her. Starting the business, it was a dual effort, right? And it was more or less like you're always very gung ho, and you're like, yeah, we should do this. I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Having children, same thing. Janet made that decision. Switching houses and doing all these different things, like really, really big decisions. I found that the majority of them I actually never ended up making alone. Like I ended up always having another individual there. When it came down to small decisions, I was always like really quick to make those on my own and not really acknowledge the environment of what was around me to be able to make those. To summarize, I think that was pretty much my epiphany, is that I've lived a life where significant decisions I've always made with the support of other individuals, and it's worked out pretty well overall, I'd say. But there's a lot in there that I had to be able to acknowledge to find out if there was potentially things that I could do differently. No regrets, but obviously opportunities to be able to see if I could take those moments away and become a better person in the future, knowing that the next stages of my life are going to require for me to be the best version of myself, right? Like young kids, thriving business, a lot of like very public obligations, things of that nature. There's all these different forces that are upon me and you as well too, in different ways that I wanted to really make sure I own my, for lack of better words, own my shit.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh, that's a good takeaway.
Yeah, it messed with me for a couple of days. Luckily I was in a car just driving around and I was able to just go stare at stuff, right? So I found myself like staring at the ocean a lot, or staring at like or like watching waves crash. And like I had a cool moment where I was driving my car on a random island. There's like a chain link of islands that rather than going straight down to Seattle from Abbotsford, you can actually just go off a beaten path, and there's a series of like 4 or 5 islands that you can drive around. And I had like F-18s like shooting over me, and like, oh man. Yeah, I think I sent you that video.
Yeah.
Where it's like, just wild. And I mean, I love jets and Tom Cruise. So like Top Gun, that whole vibe is awesome, right?
Yeah.
So
You think he was flying it or what?
in my head, yeah. He was waving at me. Hello, Gursh, you've watched Top Gun 50 times. I appreciate it. Yeah, so yeah, that was probably like the biggest one. It was a very hard thing to come to because first things first, one of the things that you and I are good at is like, we have fears, right? There's been so many things that I think it's not like we're like broken in the head or we're dropped as children. We probably were dropped in our heads at some point, but we have fears, and there's things that we're afraid of, but we quietly just don't even acknowledge them and push through. And I think that's what this was all about. It was me just facing fears after the fact, and then being able to acknowledge them when they come up next, so that I can actually say that, okay, I am actually facing a fear, versus just not feeling it all the way through myself and then just beating it. Because I'll never back down to something that I'm afraid of. I'll always end up just going head on into it and not really ever batting an eye. But yeah, it was difficult in certain ways to be able to process, because I didn't realize that was going on, and I didn't realize how simple it actually was. I thought I had all these I have so many positives and negatives to be able to go through, and I thought it was this complicated web of messes, and it turns out it was just one thing, and that's what it was.
Yeah. Makes sense. Usually life is more simple than you think, yeah. Overcomplicated as humans, for sure.
Big time.
Interesting. Yeah?
Big time.
So it was a good trip?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a good trip, man. It was a good trip. Like there was one story I have to share. And we're both rocking Nikes. We like Nikes, and I think don't get it twisted though, for whoever's listening, we both like Adidas too. We're not like brand soldiers by any means. Different brands have different purposes. I think Nike has a place in our hearts, obviously, because of where the name came from, and Zeno. But one of the places I ended up, and it was the furthest south I made it was Portland. And this is areas outside of Portland, but I made it to the Nike headquarters, and it was amazing. There was one problem though. I felt when I was there, within minutes, it felt kind of wrong that you weren't there with me. I'm gonna acknowledge that first and foremost. There's certain things that I think you and I love to do together, and there's certain things we love to do separately. But when I got there, I was like, okay, I have to come back. And I mean, if you want to go by yourself, go for it. Because I mean, obviously I did, but I'd love to go with you. Because as I was walking around, it was probably one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I pulled into a parking lot where they had all these athletes parking spots, and then I ended up parking in Mbappe's spot. I'm pretty sure he wasn't going to show up. I knew he was in France, so I was like, I'm going to just take his parking spot. And then there was like amazing buildings like the Michael Jordan building. LeBron had his innovation center and all these different places. And I'd spent 3 hours looking around and getting a really good understanding of like the facility and the campus and all these things. And we want these things for Zeno. Eventually we want to have like a Zeno campus here in Calgary, right? We've talked about that off the record a lot. And I do see it happening now that I walked through that place, I could see that in the long-term vision. But the funny thing is at the end of it, and this was like 3 hours later, my phone was dying because I was taking so many videos and like capturing moments, and my phone was at like 15%. And I was like, oh crap, it's like I don't even have a hotel booked yet. And that was the story of my entire trip, is that I would randomly end up in a space, and it wasn't until like 7 or 8 or 9 p.m. that I went and found a hotel or a motel or wherever to stay in. So I was like, crap, I need my battery life in order to be able to make sure I can at least get a hotel. But I could have just walked into a place. I just didn't want to go that far. So I ran back to my car, I got my charger, and then I went into a random building. And I found a charging station. It was almost like this. I basically just like reached behind a wall and I plugged it in and I sat there and I was awkwardly like this on my phone. And I saw this lady walk in the door and she was carrying a Nike bag. And I was like, oh, I couldn't find the store on campus. And I was like, okay, maybe there is one here. So I asked her, and I was like, hey, you have this Nike bag. Like, did you buy that here? And she's like, yeah, but it's for employees only. And I was like, oh, okay, that sucks. Like, I'm not an employee, but where can I go that's nearby that you recommend? And it's called the Company Store, I believe. And I basically was like, okay, well, I'll go there. She recommended it to me, right? So I was like, great, this lady that works here obviously knows what's going on. She's telling me to go to this store. So I rolled in and I go into the Company Store and I park my car, and it's crazy. It's like a really cool parking lot. There's like a whole VIP section and there's some sick cars there. So I'm assuming maybe they were people that were invited or athletes or whatever it was. And then there was the rest of the parking lot. I obviously parked in the general area. So I walk into the front entrance and it's got this extravagant entrance with all these flowers. And I showed you pictures, I think. And it's like a lobby. And there's like a desk, and I walk up to it and I was like, hey, I'm just here to shop. And they tell me immediately like, oh, you can't really just shop here without an invitation. Do you have an invitation? Please show it to us. And I was like, crap, no. So I leaned into it. I was like, hey guys, like I drove all the way here from Canada. This is the city I'm from. Sorry, sir, no, we can't let you in. And I was like, crap, okay, that didn't work. And then, but I pretended. I was like, okay, well, let me see, like I was on the campus and, I talked to this employee and let me see if I can figure this out. So I was pretty eager to get in there. Like it just drove all the way there. And you know how that works sometimes, where you have all this energy and you need to accomplish the task. So I stepped back out. I didn't want to be in there because at that point I felt awkward and I had left the building, and I just stood there and I watched. I'm like, I'm just gonna try to watch in a non creepy way. So I leaned back. I got out of the environment and looked from a distance, and I noticed there was a separate entrance around the side of the building, and it said employee entrance, and there was a bench there. So I'm like, okay, maybe I could just go sit down there. Sat down. I pretended like I was on my phone, but then my brain started turning, and I'm like, you know what? Why don't I go on LinkedIn? I was like, maybe I'll find somebody that actually works here, and then I can name drop them. So I keyword searched Nike, looked for employees, then I looked for a location based on Portland, and I found somebody that that I figured out that maybe I could name drop them. So I walk in through the employee entrance, super confident, back straight, head forward, walk up to the desk. I'm like, yeah, sorry, I lost my invitation, but I know this person, name dropped him. I have no idea who that is. And I had gone pretty high up. Like, it wasn't just like a random person. I don't want to say the person's name because I don't want you to get mad at me.
Phil Knight or what?
Yeah. Yeah, I know Phil. Phil invited me. Oh yeah, Phil's the owner or the founder of Nike, right? Yeah, that would be fantastic. So it didn't work. So I'm like, oh, okay, that didn't work. So I go back outside, and then I kind of had like a brainwave, and I was like, all right. I get back in my car, and then I pull into the VIP, and these two young guys come out, and I wave them down. I'm like, they had like lots of bags on them, and I waved them down, and I was like, yo, I was like, those bags are sick. Like, did you guys get a good haul? And like, was making small talk with them, and within a few minutes, I realized, I'm like, yeah, these guys are actually super chill, and I'm friends with one of the guys now. But what ended up happening was that it turns out these guys worked at the store, and I was like, right away, he's like, yeah, like, I'm an influencer, blah 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 blah, and all this other stuff. I'm like, let's just add each other on Instagram, and you seem like a really cool guy. And then I asked the question. I was like, listen, man, like, this is my story. This is where I came from. Like, I didn't come all this way to like not get in. Do you have like a pass or anything like that? I've heard you need a pass. And one of the guys right away was like, was not about it all. And he was like trying to get out of the situation. So I was like, okay, he's obviously not going to be my guy. And this other guy's like, we're vibing at this point, and he's like, yeah, you know what? Let me see what I have in my car. He goes to his car, goes and drops off his bags and stuff like that, and comes back. He's like, hey, I don't have any passes, but I have an idea. We walk into the entrance, and he goes right to the front, and he's like, guys, my shift's about to start in about 5 minutes. Here's my cousin. They're like, oh, this is your cousin? And I was like, yeah. We'll go back, and like, like, I'm just here to see his auntie. And like, basically, they're like, okay, we see your driver's license, the Canadian driver's license. And the girl's looking at it, and you could tell she's kind of weirded out by the way the driver's license looked, but didn't ask any questions, took it down, gave me information. And then I walked in, and I was like, oh, there's no way. Like, I'm in now. And he's like, give me 5 minutes. He goes and he gets changed, comes out in all his Nike swag, and gives me a full tour of the place and walks me through, tells me and recommends all the things I should buy. And he's like, these are the best buys, and so on and so forth, based on what the sticker price is and whatnot. Long story short, everything was 40% off. And I had contacted you, and I was like, yo, I'm in the Nike store. I think I sent you videos of me freaking out. And I was like, do you want anything? And obviously, we've been buying a lot of shoes because of the whole surge thing. So I think at that point, you're like, no, I'm tapped out. Like, I have way too many shoes. But I bought these ones, and I bought some running shoes for the marathon, and I bought some other sweaters, those cool boxy ones, and you can't get them here. In this colorway, I haven't been able to see here either. But that was kind of how my whole trip was, is that as soon as I got to a spot and I had decided I wanted to be there, I did whatever it took to be able to make sure I got the full experience. And that was kind of the story of even the way that when we were going out afterwards, we just always made sure we're having the best time possible with the goal of kind of just being free and living in the moment. And yeah, it was cool, but that was definitely one of the funnier stories that I experienced on that trip, and definitely a classic situation for me to get in where I'm like, no, I'm just being stubborn and I'm going to get what I want. So yeah, it was funny.
That's sick though. It's cool. Yeah, it's funny how you can you can interact with individuals and and be able to just like form that bond so instantly. But yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, humans are just humans, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think people get really caught up in like this guy was swagged out, man. He looked pretty cool. So it's like, and it turns out he's got like, cool, eh? Yeah, he had a sick car. He's like an I-8 and stuff like that.
Oh,
like, he was I don't know. He was definitely like that vibe, and right away you could tell he's like, I think he kind of understood how to live life, is that if you have an opportunity to share with somebody, you might as well, right? Like, the rules, maybe this is the big takeaway, is that like rules are there to be able to keep a framework of consistency going, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be broken. Mm-hmm. When rules are broken, that's when change happens, and that's where growth comes from. And a rule is simply something that was created by somebody else underneath the understanding that was the best way forward, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes there might be a different way. Now, I'm not saying try to break into the Nike stores and stuff like that, but ultimately nobody got hurt, and I ended up getting some sweet swag, and I got a cool story about it, and I made some friends, right? So it worked out well.
Yeah, it seems cool. It's a huge campus too, right?
Like, it was insane. Yeah. I didn't get all the way through. So 3 hours, and I still didn't get all the way through. And the architecture was like otherworldly. Like, there was some architecture in there that I felt like I was in Halo. You know when you in Halo, when you're playing the video games and you come around a corner, you're like, whoa, when you stop for a second. That's how I felt. Like I felt like I was in a video game. Like it was so wild. Yeah. And well, this is classic. I tried getting into all the employee areas. I successfully made it into one employee area. And they're like, what are you doing here? I went into a conference room and sat down in the middle of a meeting. It was hilarious. It was it was in one of their innovation centers. Because I was too deep in and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, I'm in the conference room now and people are looking at me. So I sat down. And I was like, oh, I thought this was like a public forum education session. It was like, yeah. I was up to my typical antics of just trying to have as much fun as possible. But they started laughing at me. They're like, yeah, sorry, sir, this is a closed meeting. And it was, I got a picture too. Jesus. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
No comment. I guess it's funny. So Nike, good segue into the, I guess, middle of your trip / Surge stuff. Yeah, Surge, we haven't talked about that. And that was already a month. Was that a month ago? No, like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
August 13th or 17th or something.
Yeah, that's already like 2. Holy crap.
I guess the 13th.
Yeah, so then you led into the Surge. So obviously, for everyone's information, so the Surge made it to the playoffs, which in the CEBL is pretty much that you go to a playoff weekend and it's already predetermined. So it was in Vancouver, or actually, sorry, not Vancouver, it was Langley.
Langley.
So it was at the Langley Event Center, hosted by the Vancouver Bandits this year. And so the Surge were there, and they play the semifinal and the final, right? There?
Well, it was only
so there's 4
progress
teams, right?
if you win.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. So we ended up flying out there, going to support the Surge. Obviously, we sponsor them.
Well, I drove in. I guess you flew there, and I picked you up.
Yeah. And so we met there, and ended up being, I think, I don't even know what to call that, a whirlwind of a weekend. All things considered, super, super cool to see kind of how it all came together and the different teams and kind of like the structure of the whole tournament.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, so I guess leading into that, like, what was your takeaway on the whole tournament?
Oh man,
seeing what the Surge achieved in their inaugural year.
You're asking me some good questions today. I think there's a few things, right? One, I was coming in to that weekend, not having talked to like any other human beings for days that I deeply knew, right? It was just strangers that I was interacting with. So it was really nice to see you after not seeing like a friendly face for like a long time. And then obviously all of our friends in Vancouver, it was really good seeing them as well too. So I went in there with like an interesting mentality of just peace and calm. And I know you and I had been talking prior of like how we were feeling, and I didn't feel nervous until the buzzer went off. So I was going in there in this zen state of like, oh yeah, like I'm on vacation, I'm relaxed, like this is whatever. And then the game was the most intense sporting experience of my life. And it was against the Vancouver Bandits. So they're the home team. The stands are full. There's a couple Surge people. We're getting greased pretty much, right? Like people are booing next to us, and like we're getting the gears from people indirectly. I think nobody was really messing with us because we were like wearing, we were wearing like tank tops, like the Surge tank tops, and you're kind of all tattied out. So I think you might have scared some people. So nobody was directly saying anything to us, but ultimately, like, there was a lot of heckling going on, and probably the most intense game because the way that it finished was wild, right? It went into the extra time, and then it was literally one-on-one bucket. It was we would have lost if Vancouver hadn't made a mistake and Steph didn't nail the three. Like it was down to, like, it was razor thin. And that victory was insane. Like it didn't feel real. Like it did not feel real. It was nuts.
Yeah, I think for most exciting sporting event, I would definitely agree. I just like the moment, like you're saying, when he hit that three, and we like, so again to paint a bit of a picture. So there's like where the players sit, and then there's obviously Jason and Usman and all of them sit there. We went over there, right? We went over to them in the last couple minutes. I think it was 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there, and obviously no one's talking, right? Like we're all just kind of like, just every mistake or every little thing, you're like, holy, like, is this gonna happen? Yeah. And then when he scored that three, I'm pretty sure all of us like knocked over all the chairs, jumped over everyone. Like you threw your phone in the air. You literally threw your phone and hit the person behind us.
Yeah, I think I punched somebody in the face by accident, because remember that guy had blood on his shirt, and I was like,
that was Usman's brother or like relative that all of a sudden had blood on his shirt,
and my hand went forward at the same time. I don't know what happened, but
we like jumped over the thing onto the court, and it was I've never had an experience like that at a sporting event either. So that was pretty cool. I think that kind of set the tone for the weekend, because that was on Friday, right? That was Friday night.
I think we got caught on TSN jumping up and down.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Friends were sending us, or actually it was Jared, I think, might have sent.
Yeah.
On his story, he caught it, yeah.
Yeah, so that was obviously cool, and then I think that led into then the final. So then that put us in the final on the Sunday.
Yeah.
Which was an experience as well. So they played the Shooting Stars, so Scarborough, which is kind of funny too because they were there last year, right? First year, they were in the final, they lost.
They lost, yeah.
So it was kind of a bit of a repeat story there when it came to like obviously us being our first season being in the final, and that was a really close, tight game too. I think the energy in that one was a little bit different. I think at least from our end, right? We talked about this afterwards. Is like the expectations of what to expect out of that one was a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big. Yeah, that was a weird game too, because that one I think the energy was different. I think the energy was higher from the Surge side because a couple of people flew in actually. I think some people came and there was a bigger crowd around us for the Surge side.
Yeah.
But then obviously that moment when they scored and ended up losing the championship there, I think it all kind of sunk in, and we I think different emotions. I think it brought the whole season together, but it made us realize, I think we talked about this afterwards, is the expectation, again, I think everyone always wants to win the championship. I think we talked about this like a few months ago on one of the podcasts, is the expectation is you want to win the championship, right? But is that realistic on like considering what they've done or where they've come from to be able to do everything perfect in the first season is pretty spectacular. So I think for them to lose, as much as it sucks, and I can say this out loud, and if Jason listens, he's probably not gonna like this, but it's almost better at the sense, because we talked about this, like sometimes if they can take away from that loss and do what Scarborough did, right, like come back and Scarborough was strong, like you could see the way they were playing, they definitely had been there before in the final, they knew the pressure, they were a little bit
more tactical.
They were tactical and dialed in. You could just see the difference.
Yeah.
Not that the Surge weren't good. It's just the difference, right? The small things that make that difference of winning the championship. So
yeah,
I think there was a lot to unpack there and take away on the season. But from our side, again, having our name on that jersey and kind of the way that they held themselves and the way that they went about losing, I think was the thing that was not, like cool for me to see, at least, is like, it's not, they still held their heads high. It wasn't that this was the end of something. It's like, how do we now come back stronger next season, right? And how do we all play together still? How do we get obviously the same type of players and build that team momentum going forward? So it was an interesting, very interesting experience to lose something like that when you're not in the game, but being like so close to it, right, all year or all summer season.
Yeah.
I don't know what your feeling was on it, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major dichotomy to the days leading up to it for me, right? Because I was by myself and like even utilizing the Nike story of getting into the company store, is that the reality behind that specific situation is that it still actually took a team. It took myself and another individual to be able to in order for me to be able to get in that store, right? It took a team effort, but I was on the court, so I was still able to choose the moves and make the moves. When we're dealing with the Surge stuff, we're quiet bystanders at best. Like we stand by, we don't really get to say much. Like Jason likes to come stand over by us because we know how to keep that energy calm. But at the same time, I think it was a testament to what it means to let go of the vine and to just trust people. Is that we chose to invest in the Surge by first choosing to invest in Jason, and every single decision that he's made, we obviously fully support. And being able to see that in motion to the fact that we finished first in the West and then made it all the way to the finals says a lot about what trust looks like. And that if you choose to trust people in life, that it generally ends up yielding a better circumstance, right? And I think there's two different ways of looking at it. Is that one, when you choose to trust an individual, that doesn't necessarily mean that you get to put all the onus on them. What that ultimately means is that you're part of that process. Is that, hey, I know this is happening because I'm here, but simultaneously that I trust you enough that if it works or it doesn't work, that it's all good, because we're still going to be able to go together. And that ties into what you're saying, is that the loss is probably for the best. I agree with you. And I think it goes back down to what I'm saying, is that we're not here for winning or losing. We're here for the city growing and a community coming together and getting behind something bigger than ourselves, because that's ultimately what that was. We were just two individuals standing next to a basketball hoop, watching a bunch of people that we believe in try to pull off the impossible. And in my opinion, I think they did pull off the impossible. I did not expect us to make it that far. Initially, at the start of the season, I was like, I'm just here for fun, right? And let's just see how this goes. But the deeper you get into it, it's really easy to get lost in the noise. And then all of a sudden you feel bad because you're like, well, we should have won the competition. But the reality in life is that all of us need to go back to day one. What was the goal that we set out to achieve? And what did things actually end up turning out as? And then that gives you the actual perspective. Because I did see some people there, and you and I chose to stay around till the end. We shook as many hands as possible of the opposing team, of the people part of the CBL, and then ultimately we ended with going to the Surge bench, where there's a bunch of downtrodden individuals, right? And I know they didn't share that perspective. Their mindset was, oh, we should have won the championship. But we focused on, giving them a handshake or a hug and making sure we lifted their spirits and telling them to keep their heads high. Because the start of the season, this was never the conversation, yet we made it all the way to the final. So that was my biggest takeaway ultimately in a nutshell, is that it's all about trust and knowing that whatever the result is, that you're winning regardless.
Yeah, I think the biggest win for them was what they did for Calgary, right? As an overall, I think that was our opening statement when we launched the partnership, was this is all about community and bringing awareness to community and bringing something different to Calgary. And I think that was like knocked out of the park. I think they did a great job with that. They made a huge impact in Calgary, and I think the awareness for the sport, for what they do for all four quadrants of Calgary, right? That was what the goal was. At the end of the day, obviously basketball, you want to win the game, but I 100% agree. Like it's very, they did a great job of that, and I think that's why it was so cool to have our name on that jersey, because at the end of the day, it wasn't about losing that tournament. It was about having our name besides something that stands for something more, right? Which is what we believe in with Zeno as well. So yeah, it was an experience. Excuse me, that. It was an experience that it's hard to really put it into like a simplified words and sentences, but something that was really cool for the company, like a big milestone for us. So I don't know if there's more about the Surge side. I think we're just excited to now go into the off season, refine. I think the big thing now is refine, dial in. How do we become more involved in the community? How do we do more, right? I think that's what we always look for, is what's that next big thing and that next big challenge, and how do we kind of integrate it into Calgary and become a staple of Calgary when it comes to the basketball community and obviously the community as a whole. And then treat the off season like practice, and then go into next season ready to dominate, even though, like you said, we're sitting on the side hoping that obviously our choices pay off. So
and I think that's where this season might be a little bit different, the upcoming one, right? Because I do know that you and I have some ideas in regards to the mindset side of things, where we can talk to some of the players, obviously in like a collective manner, not one-on-one, to be able to see if there's any value that we can provide from that side. Because I know when I was talking to some of the players over the season, they were always kind of surprised with us running marathons and doing these things, and they considered that as like an athletic feat, and we're like, yo, you guys are professional basketball players. Like, how does that even register, right? Like, it was weird for us to hear that. So I know there's going to be a lot of change that happens in the season, and it's going to be nothing but improvement, but simultaneously testing stuff, right? So I know there's going to be a lot of different risks that are going to be taken this season to be able to see what actually yields. But in summary, I'm stoked. Like, I'm just happy that we're here for the ride, and obviously grateful to everybody at the Surge, at the Surge offices and on the court and behind the scenes in the locker rooms. Like, they're all doing an excellent job, and that was the biggest piece of feedback that we heard from all the players, is that they said that their favorite thing about the entire season was how awesome the organization was and how well everything was ran.
And how much they included us. Like, I think it goes both ways. I know obviously title sponsorship can mean a lot of things, but I think that they included us so deeply, and even again, going back to like at the end of that moment when they lost there, like 100% of them pretty much came over to us and shook our hand and said thank you, right? Which is crazy. All things considered, right? Like, it's pretty cool that they that we get to be involved in it at that level. So 100% like thank you to everyone in that organization.
And actually that weekend ended up kind of funny, right? Like the Surge aspect of it, because you and I decided to go for a drive and go take in downtown at like nighttime. And we ended up running into some of Drake's friends in what felt like a back alley.
Oh, in Yale Town.
Yeah. And that was interesting as well, too, because we basically, we went up to them and told them congratulations. And and then obviously, you know, share some sentiment. They were cool. I mean, they were chill about it, right? It was a brief moment, but it was pretty funny to be able to run into them out of all places. This very dimly lit street in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, that would have been so funny if it was just like, okay, all right, let's throw down Zeno versus Drake or OVO, but no,
Like,
I'm just
Anchorman,
teasing.
yeah.
It was cool. And I mean, they're chill guys as well too. So it just goes to show the league as a whole is morphing into something really cool. And I'm just really stoked to be able to see our brand next to a brand that big. And obviously people who have this massive vision beyond even our vision, right? So it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What else is a big thing? I think a big one, SFS, Strides for Sustainability, is now wrapped up.
We're professional golfers now too.
Yeah, the golf tournament too, we can chat about that after.
Yeah, we're pros. We're pros now.
I think, when did we wrap SFS on? The
August
last one
20th.
was August 20th, so Edmonton. So we ran Edmonton 10K, a few people ran the half, the full, the 10K. There's some good turnout.
We took a way different approach. This is the first time we've ever done a race like that,
Yeah.
where we didn't race, which was weird for us.
Yeah, I wouldn't say not race, but I guess, yeah, never mind. We didn't race, yeah.
No, usually we try to go as fast as possible and kill ourselves, right? But going into this weekend was a little bit different. So we had Toronto, May 7th, which we both obliterated and set like crazy PRs. And then that one was a full 42K. And then we had Calgary on May 28th, which was like it felt like the hottest part of the summer. And it wasn't even really summer. It was like plus 30 something that day. It was for those who ran that marathon, I feel bad for you. Like that was a terrible day to run a marathon. It was way too hot. And we did 10K there, but we also set PRs, I think. We set PRs for the 10K. And then summer kind of just happened, right? And we walked into Edmonton. Both you and I were like, I feel like we were both kind of tired going into that weekend. And we both had a quick conversation the days leading up to it. And we're like, hey, you know what? There's some people in the company that are running. Azure specifically, who's one of our day one team members. He is actually, in my opinion, he's day one. He's like day one, number one. He's been one of our first hires in the company. He's been around forever. We decided to run it with him. And man, was he slow. Holy smokes, he was slow. But I have to grease him because I know he's a competitive guy.
But he said we're allowed to say this.
Okay, let's hear this.
For the record, as for prove this, we're only as good as our weakest link. And he said we're allowed to say that. And so when we ran with him, I think it's more of like challenging him and seeing him overcome challenges, right? I think that was kind of the approach that we took, is that we get to see someone else, and I think it's like it's not always about us and trying to achieve these great things. And again, I think actually Edmonton would have been easier to set a 10K pace because it's pretty flat, and it was like 15 degrees maybe, right?
We would have destroyed it. There was 2 inclines in Calgary that cooked us.
Yeah.
We lost probably 2 or 3 minutes on those inclines.
Yeah. So I think the approach was right. It worked out. Yeah, it was
well, he set a goal.
Good pace.
He set a goal of an hour and 13 minutes the night before dinner, or the dinner before race day, and I pushed him, right, because I'm like, I want at least a marker. I don't want to just go there and not do anything, because I have difficulty with that, even if it's a ridiculously long time. Like I was like, I need at least something. And then we were literally hands on his back pushing him at certain points, and he had like an asthma attack. Like it was because he is asthmatic. So for him to be able to, he did it in like 1:12:40 something, and so he beat his goal, which was big for him. But he also, and we'll have him on the podcast at some point. You guys will have to meet him. He's hilarious, but also extremely intelligent and a fun guy to be around. He talked to us afterwards, and he's like, this is eye opening for me. He's like, I didn't realize, like, he's an athletic guy. He's played basketball almost his entire life, and he was surprised. And I think for me, that was such a beautiful way to be able to end off the Strides things. And I think from the sounds of it, looks like we achieved our goal for fundraising.
Yeah, I think we just a little bit past, but 15,000 was the goal. We're over that, so awesome. Thank you everyone for donating to that and supporting that. Yeah,
thank you so much for all that support. We ended up achieving it. It felt impossible at certain moments, but we definitely got it through.
Yeah.
But what you said is beautiful, man. Like, not everything's about us and achieving these things. it was nice to be able to step out of it. And you and I had a lot of fun. Like we were just running around laughing. I think that actually frustrated people more because we were running backwards, sideways, and we didn't break a sweat until we got to the finish line.
Reading articles.
Yeah, you were reading an article on your phone. I caught it on camera. It was hilarious. And then
It's classic.
yeah. So I think but it was also beautiful seeing the struggle. What 10K was for that day is what a marathon was for us.
Yeah.
Actually, it was harder because we don't even stop running during the 42K now. We blast all the way through, and he had to stop and face some demons. And
Yeah.
I can imagine that 10K probably felt like 5 hours.
Yeah.
Like when you're in that pain, that feels like nothing feels like everything, all the air even around you turns into molasses, right?
Yeah.
So it was cool to see him through that. And we saw some other team members like Colin finished the marathon in a killer time.
Yeah, I did,
Yeah, Colin's one of the individuals that actually helped start our Edmonton office 4-ish years ago, I think. And he ran in 4 hours and 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Really good time for a first marathon. Jesse
did the half. It was a good
Francis
turnout.
joined as well too for the 10K. There's quite a few different people. Mark ran with us for the whole time with Az for. There's a lot of people there, and if I missed anybody, I apologize. But yeah, it was cool, and that was over with now. So the fundraiser's been satisfied.
Yep.
We hit the goal. We finished all 3 races, and even leading into that, like I was kind of debating. I was like, man, I don't really feel like running this. Like I don't really I didn't at all because we stopped running after Calgary.
Yeah.
Like we pretty much stopped running. I pretended like I was running still, but I was just rowing more or less and did the casual runs. And my feet are still healing from Toronto, still. Like I know yours,
They're pretty good. I think it was actually, it's funny you say that. I was talking to someone the other day about the healing of the feet, and she ran marathons. She's done like, I don't even know, 40 or something all over. And she said that it never heals after a while. She just has a messed up toe. Same thing, left. She said it's the way that you plant your feet.
Oh, interesting.
So I think we're at that stage too, but yeah, like mine's like half, like it's whatever. It doesn't hurt as much, but it's still not. I don't think I'll ever be fine. Which is
So mine look
it doesn't look
bad.
good.
They look really bad. So and obviously that's why I wear shoes all the time. I wear shoes in the shower now too. Just teasing. But like my little one, or my eldest kid, Emma, wants to be a doctor. So I'm like, let's see if this is legit. I put my feet up in front of her. I'm like, check it out. She inspected them, told me which one was more damaged, and like completely dove right into it. And I was like, I would never do that. I would never want to touch somebody else's like bloody feet. I was like, this is insane. So it was cool from that perspective as well too. I was able to gut check her quickly to see if she was actually all about that life, and you can try and keep her on that course as best as possible. So there's a funny little moment out of it as well too. But really, really impressed with the team, and it was very humbling as well too to be able to see anybody. And honestly, man, like I haven't had that much. You and I haven't done a fun run in years. Like we used to do them when we first started getting into it. So it was actually kind of just fun to go get out there and stretch our legs, and like it is kind of in a weird way. It was just to go just to show how good our cardio is. We more or less didn't break a sweat running 10K at like a decent pace. Like it was kind of surprising from that standpoint too.
Yeah. That was fun. Good way to end the. I don't want to say it here, but end the summer, so to say.
The season, let's call it the season.
The running season, and then obviously on to the next ones here. But
I'm thinking next one's probably going to be in May.
Again, May's a good one.
Whispers of Ottawa, maybe California, right? So we got to nail a location down. I already got all the planning down, but we'll shift gears in another sport thing. So today's been a lot about sports. We're both joining the PGA Tour. I think we finally
definitely am not.
But it sounds like the commitment to golf is almost a little bit there now, finally, right? For more so than it has been previously.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's always a hard sport. Like for the people that play golf, I think it's such a weird one because it's not as I'm not gonna say it's
physically
not physical,
demanding,
but it's not as physically demanding. But it is. So it's like the mental side of it is so. It can be so draining, and so like, I don't know. It's just such a weird game because like there's so many little moments that can mess up the whole 18 holes, right? But it's a fun sport. I enjoyed it. I think for obviously what we're talking about here. So there's the Strass Foundation charity golf tournament that we were the sponsors for with the launch event. That was like last weekend. It was good. It was fun. It was super cool to see everyone come out. A cool tournament style, like the Texas Scramble is always fun. it lets you kind of, when you have bad shots or you have a bad moment, you can take someone else's, which is nice. So I think that takes a little bit away on the mental side. But yeah, overall, golf is an interesting sport. It's one that I still can't pin on like, how do you actually build the skill set? I think it's the one sport that I've found where you really got to start at the basics and learn the basics to get better. Where I feel like there's certain sports, like let's say, whatever, soccer, whatever, you can build your own style and become very good.
Absolutely.
Where I feel like in golf, it's like, if you have your own style, you hit a ceiling way quicker. It's like there's just certain techniques and certain things that you have to master, and then you can throw your style onto that to get to that next level. Where I feel like if you try to go and whatever, be like, I can swing like this and my swing doesn't have to be perfect, you'll always like be able to get to a certain level of whatever play or score. So I found that very interesting, and the basics are so frustrating because they just don't seem natural. Like especially the swing and stuff. For me, it doesn't seem natural. But it's like that basic going slow will actually get you to have a better hit off the tee box or whatever you're doing. So yeah, golf is an interesting one. But the tournament, what did you find? What was kind of the big things for you at the tournament?
Yeah, it was an interesting day. Well, it was my birthday that day too, right? So I woke up pretty early in the morning.
Still celebrate those at your old age?
Yeah, probably the last one I celebrate, man. I don't know. I'm technically in my mid-30s now, right? So which means I'm closer to 40 than I am to 30.
Oh.
Yeah.
Then it's over the hill. And
is it?
I don't know.
Is it? I want to live till 100, right? That's the goal. So like, I think maybe my outlook is a little bit different. Yeah. I think over the hill it'll be 50, right? So, on the downslide. But it was a really nice morning. Like I had breakfast with the kids and like was able to spend the morning in like a relaxed state. But the days leading up to it were a little bit different than any other golf tournament than I've done previously. So I usually show up to these golf events like dreading it because somebody's invited me, and you and I are guys that'll, if we're invited to something and we say we're going to be there, we don't show up with anything other than a good attitude. We'll internalize the frustrations and not show anybody that we ever feel that way, right? Because we want to be professional even in friendship. So that wasn't the case though. I think I had a conversation with you one morning and I was like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm done fighting this. I'm committing to this. So just to give some reference here, I've played golf, probably the majority of golf I played with you, or maybe 1 or 2 times with those. So like maybe 7 or 8 times, I think, roughly, in my life. And I didn't own a set of clubs coming into this tournament. And I bugged you and I was like, what do you think I should do? Like, do you think I should go get fitted? And I talked to a couple different friends for advice, and ultimately Keaton ended up helping me out. Keaton is a really good friend of ours, and his wedding is this weekend, and we're golfing this weekend before his wedding, which is going to be great. So it looks like we're getting overexposed a little bit. But he had given me some advice, and he actually found a set of clubs for me, and I went and picked them up. For those getting into golf, just a quick tip: don't go and buy expensive stuff. Though this isn't cheap, it's also not expensive. I think I spent about $200, and I got what looked like a brand new set in what looked like a brand new bag off of Kijiji. And that was probably a Canadian Tire special set, but it was still a lot cheaper than going into a store and buying it. And they worked great on the day of. So my mentality going into the tournament was actually one of excitement. And I was like, oh, I got a new set of clubs. Like I'm ready to actually give it a go. And I think, and I don't know if you were surprised with how well I ended up doing, but I was surprised with how well I ended up doing and some of the shots I ended up hitting. I think a 60-foot putt is, I don't know if I was being gassed up, but I think a 60-foot putt is insane. It felt insane because I was so far away from the pin. And then when I got it in, I like did the classic. The only thing that was in my head was all those highlights of Tiger Woods going down on one. You just going like that. And I did that. So it was super cheesy. And there was a one shot where you get to face the pro. And some of you have seen this on social media. I beat Aaron, who's a pro, but the icing is that he did a one-handed shot. Had he had both hands, he would have beat me for sure. But I got it within like 17 feet or something of the pin on that hole, so that was also surprising. And then a couple holes I got birdies. A lot of the holes were the best ball, or the Texas Scramble ball was paid off of mine. And I think that was the biggest thing for me for the tournament, if I'm looking internally, was that rather than fighting something, I chose to just accept it, and I was in a flow state for the first like 10, 11 holes, and then it's just the heat started getting to me. Like, it was hot. And then this time of the year in August, it's a lot different. Like the hottest time of the day is not the middle of the day. It's generally the evening, like 4 or 5 p.m. because the angle of the sun is now shifted and it cuts through the sky with a significant amount of intensity. And it was right around that time I started fading, right? Like it was hot. And I think that's where golf gets interesting, is that you're exposed to elements as well too. Mm-hmm. But in the terms of the event as a whole, it was pretty exciting. There was a ton of energy. Obviously Zeno's brand was right alongside the Straz Foundation, which is focused on raising money for individuals who cannot play sports in the standard fashion. They obviously have some sort of disability or some sort of injury. So adaptive sports, in a sense, is being able to have money going towards that in order to be able to help that sport grow. Yeah. So as far as I understand, obviously we haven't seen the numbers yet, but I think it actually ended up doing really well. A lot of familiar faces came out. A lot of old friends that I hadn't seen in a while came out. And then we had the second leg of the day, which was at the launch pad, right? The Top Golf style thing. Yeah. And then I think you had a lot of fun, right? It turns out you're better at golfing with one hand or driving the ball with one hand than you are with two hands.
Yeah. I think that the one hand side of things is interesting at Launchpad, but I think I was having this conversation the other day again about it. I'm gonna try this weekend. We'll see, but it's not just the driver. Like it was the irons, everything. I think for me, it's the mental aspect of the way that I swing my arm. I feel like with the one-handed, I just don't try to like kill it, or I don't know what I do, and it works better. Yeah. So I'm gonna try that. I'm not gonna be no like Snappy Gilmore level here with this, but I'm gonna try it here on the weekend and see. But yeah, Launchpad was good. A lot of familiar faces. I think a lot of good support for obviously the event, the cause, and everything like that. And I think everybody was had a good time, which was nice to see. I think the guys or the individuals that played the golf tournament throughout the day, you could definitely tell the energy was lower. Yeah. I think we ended up taking like 6.5 hours running for the whole tournament. And it definitely wore on you. Like you could tell by the last couple holes, you're getting like, I don't even know, I think our team finished -3 as a team. And honestly, like we were losing, like the bogeys and stuff were happening on the back, like the last couple holes, because you're just like, you know what, you want to be done, right? Swing and hope that it makes it there.
Beautiful course though. It was
beautiful course. Yeah.
What was it called again?
Heritage Point.
Heritage Point. Yeah. I liked it a lot. That was probably my favorite course I've played to date.
Yeah, it's cool that they split it right with the desert on the front, where it's a bit more open. Yeah. A bit more forgiving. I think the back was definitely not as forgiving.
Beautiful though,
yeah, beautiful, but usually with beauty on a golf course comes that it becomes harder. Is what I found.
Okay, interesting. I haven't thought about that.
You'll see in Kananaskis. Kananaskis is beautiful, and it's a very hard course from what I've heard.
Yeah, we're playing with Keaton and Justin, who are both really good golfers.
Yeah, so it'll be good. But no, overall, like I think, what better way to golf than to do it for a charity tournament, right?
100%.
So, and I think the turnout was really good, jam-packed. Every single team was filled. Everybody had a good time, it looked like, and I think there was the winning side. I think was -14 or -13
Holy
or something.
smokes.
So pretty good. Pretty good.
They must have cheated.
Yeah, it's an honor system. You hope not. If you have to cheat on a charity golf tournament, something's probably wrong. But and then the other support as well. It was super cool to see. Just even the activations on the holes and stuff. Right, there's some crazy ones. Just close to There were some cool ones that were really like interesting to see individuals play. That you're like, wow, it's just impressive what people can do, right? So, but other than that, I think that was a good way to. Again, not going to use the words here to end summer, but it it was a good way to lead into the closing of a season, right? So
the closing of a season, because I think right now we don't have any major events coming up.
We have a city cleanup in Lethbridge.
Right.
I know in September, kind of mid-September.
I think the 18th.
Which we'll plug here, so if anyone from Lethbridge is listening, you can come join us for that. There'll be details to come.
Then you and I have a trip to RE Plus.
Yeah, then we have
with Asprey. I think.
Actually, I guess that's a good way to kind of go into the next part of things. What's to come? RE Plus, that'll be big. So it's the biggest solar renewable energy show in North America, and I think it's one of the biggest in the world. It's not the biggest. I think the biggest are in Europe or in Asia, but. Huge event for pretty much new products, all the suppliers, distributors, pretty much manufacturers. It's kind of like the big thing for our industry. So we're going to that. We're going to be able to meet with a bunch of individuals and see what technologies we can kind of pick up, bring back, and obviously refine and continue to help Zeno be the best company when it comes to that stuff. So that'll be fun. The city cleanup, obviously in Lethbridge, will be a big one. That one's going to be interesting because it'll be our first one, right? So
yeah, I'm really excited to meet some of the. I've met a few PT members from Lethbridge. I'm excited to meet them.
Yeah, and just meet the community, kind of see how the Lethbridge side of things will be good, right? You always get to kind of see the individuals that interact with there. And then other big things to come. Can't share too much on the details of obviously the next steps for Zeno when it comes to what we're doing and where we want to go. But there's some big things on the horizon here in the next kind of Q4, Q1, Q2. So those will be keep your eyes peeled for that on what the expansions look like for us.
Yeah, that's
Is there anything else we missed? I'm trying to think here. That's the major thing, right?
Yeah, I think the only other thing that we can talk about is like, how are you? Because I asked you how your summer was. I asked you about all these different things, but how are you doing as an individual, as a human being? How's life?
Good. Can't complain. I think figuring out a lot of things, lots of different approaches to thinking and the mental side of things have been a big part lately. Kind of what you were saying with like the reflecting on yourself and kind of figuring out things for like the future and what that looks like, and obviously with the changing environment when it comes to work roles and things that we're responsible for has been a big impact on that.
Yeah.
But I think there's some conversations, even a conversation with one of our advisors there that we had at the start of the week. They just kind of they give you confidence, right? And you're able to kind of like bounce it off people and see what the reaction is. So that was good, but yeah, overall good. Can't complain. Like moving along. Life's good. Overall, you?
Yeah. I think life is as it should be for me at the moment, and it's definitely. I think both of us are feeling it. We're going through like a weird transformation.
100%.
The company's growing at a rate that I don't think anybody could have predicted. Our personal lives are evolving and changing so much on a regular basis. And yeah, it's good. I think the easiest way for me to be able to answer that question is I feel like I've never been more observant of everything that's going on around me. Like my level of awareness, I don't necessarily know if it's good or bad, but my level of awareness of what I'm actually doing from a decision-making standpoint is the highest it's ever been. What I feel by that is that every single individual that's born on the planet, it generally falls underneath Maslow's hierarchy, right? And then you have that hierarchy that allows you to be able to understand your needs. You and I might be experiencing certain aspects of that hierarchy that we haven't ever experienced before. So we're taking a look at life from a lens that isn't necessarily comfortable. It's definitely unusual, but we're highly aware of the fact that we're going through that, which is pretty interesting. And even the way our conversations are a lot different in this specific moment. And you can always tell there's a lot of learning going on both sides of the fence. And I think we've always listened to each other a lot in terms of when I'm talking and I say something and you're talking and you say something. I'm like, what does that actually mean here? But I feel like more than ever before, I understand what it is that you've gone through and are going through better than ever before. So yeah, it's good. And even on the relationship side of things, a lot of progress has been made in different areas that I didn't expect, but it feels good. A lot of it feels really good, and a lot of it feels right. And the pursuit of living in my authentic self is something that I'm actually just fully starting to embrace. And I'm glad it's happening now and not on my deathbed, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, my own version of a midlife crisis at an early age, which is probably the easy way to summarize it. It's been a lot of fun.
See, it is midlife, right?
You want me to live to 70? You want me to live longer, man? I was like, what?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, lots of stuff, always evolving, right? But
yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. That's a pretty big update, so.
Big. I felt like we just did a massive brain dump. And for those who were able to hang around to the end, thanks for joining us for another episode. We have some really interesting guests that are coming up over the next few episodes, and it's going to continue to be, an awesome podcast of us, leading the charge in different ways. And there's going to be some really cool moments, I'm sure, come as the year comes into its next stage, which is fall. I'm not sure how you are with fall. I love fall.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Fall's beautiful. Yeah.
Fall's one of my favorite seasons, and I know maybe I'm alone on this one. I really enjoy winter. Like I love
I
winter.
don't like winter. I'm definitely alone on that one, but
Yeah. I guess I embraced the cold for the first time last year beyond what I normally do, and this year I have some pretty awesome plans coming up in the winter time in terms of like outdoor activities and things I want to do. And we live in. This is one thing actually I'll share with a thought as I traveled. The one thing that I came back to when I came back to Calgary and I realized is how beautiful this place is. And we always talk about this. You leave and you come back. But even the variety of seasons that we have and how much it changes is nice. Like I like that because you really cherish each moment and all the weather. Because if it was sunny all the time, I don't think I would take advantage of it in the way that I do when it does show up. And I know my lens is really narrow in regards to where I've lived. It's not like I've been all over the world, but I've been in different cities. And yeah, Calgary's pretty special. Seeing all those beautiful trees in Oregon and being in Washington State and stuff like this just made me realize that we have all that here, but more. So it's a pretty special place, and it's nice to be back home.
100%. Like one actually last thing that we never really mentioned on these is, if you're interested to be on the podcast, or if you know someone that would fit with what we talk about, like reach out to us. I think we'd always love to have conversations and be able to kind of dig further into that and see how you're leading the charge. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and please follow, like, and share this podcast. Obviously, the algorithm loves that stuff, so push it as much as you guys can, and let's get this message out there.
Sweet. Perfect.
Awesome.